So we have already signed the builds for Android. It's time for us to learn how to do the same thing for iOS. So if you have ever deployed your application to an iPhone or to an actual device, or even to the stores, you may already know what we're going to do. We're basically going to set up some provisioning profiles. In fact, let me navigate for a second to App Center and to my iOS application, where, by the way, in the build section, you will see that the application has been built for developers and testers already, because we set the trigger to be on push, and this was built when we pushed over to our repo, but we do need to configure the signing because so far we are not signing the builds. So let me go ahead and take a look at this in the developers branch. If I were to sign the builds, I am being required a provisioning profile and a certificate. So maybe you already know how to create a certificate and the provisioning profile, but let me go ahead and do that in this lecture. So in developer.apple.com, I'm going to navigate to my account and select certificates, identifiers, and profiles. In here, you should already have a certificate, and we're going to be using a distribution certificate. After all, we do want to distribute this application. If you don't have a certificate, which I hope you already do, you can just click on Add New Certificate, and it's going to guide you through the creation of the certificate. But let me go ahead and focus on the creation of the profile right now. So to be able to create the profile, first I will need an app ID. So let me go ahead and create an app ID. The name of my ID is going to be LPA Finance, and I will create this as an explicit app ID. So let me actually navigate back to Visual Studio to show you something. If we open the info.plist file for our iOS project, we can actually set some automatic provisioning to quickly deploy to a device, but it will actually create a wildcard ID. If you're not familiar with wildcard IDs, it will be something like com.lalorosas.asterisks. So every single application with com.lalorosas as the bundle identifier can be used, but I don't want that. I want an explicit app ID just for this application, because otherwise, even though you can actually distribute to App Center to developers, you may find a bit of an issue there if you do not set a manual provisioning here. So let me go ahead and copy the bundle identifier in here. And back in the creation of my app ID, I will set the app ID to be that bundle ID that I just copied. For this one, I don't really have to enable any services, but if you needed, for example, push notifications, which we're going to take a look at in the next section, by the way, you could set that in here. Let's go ahead and click on continue for now. And we're going to confirm that this is correct. You can see how Game Center and in-app purchases are enabled by default. That's okay. We're going to see the identifier. It's going to be pretty much the same bundle ID that we saw, plus this unique string. Click on register, and our app ID is going to be ready, which means that we can hit on done and go ahead and create the actual provisioning profile. So in provisioning profiles, I'm going to navigate actually to the distribution ones and create a new one. This one will have to be a distribution ad hoc provisioning profile. Not yet for the App Store. We're actually going to be installing on a limited number of registered devices. These registered devices part is important. Later on, we will need to sign for specific devices. We will take a look at that later. Click on continue, select the app ID that we have just created, which is my LPA Finance. Click on continue and select one of my certificates, of course, because we're going to be distributing, we need a distribution certificate. So select one, click on continue, and we can select the number of devices. This is related to what I told you about, that these can only be installed on a limited number of devices. In here, all I'm going to do is select a few devices where I want this to be signed. Eventually, either way, you can actually sign more devices directly through App Center, but you can select some in here at the beginning. So select one, click on continue, and name your provisioning profile. I will just call this LPA Finance underscore PP for provisioning profile. Click on continue. And here is where we can actually download the profile. And notice the extension mobile provision is actually the one that App Center is requiring. So let me go ahead and select the developer's build. Click on manage. And I'm going to start to sign this build. And notice that I can actually just drag and drop my provisioning profile. But now I'm actually missing a certificate. So let me go ahead and create the certificate now. Contrary to what you may think, it's not as easy as just going over to my certificate, which is going to be my distribution one, and click on download. It's not going to be that easy because this is a .cer file and we require a P12 file. But I do want to download that, select it, and this is actually going to be opening it on the keychain. And we're going to see the certificate right here. It's important that you identify the certificate that was used to create your provisioning profile. So in my case, I can easily identify it by this string, which if you remember was used when we created the provisioning profile, and also the expire date is easy for me to identify. I see other certificates, but these are development certificates. This is the only distribution, or at least the only complete distribution certificate that I have. I have another one, but it doesn't have this private key. It's important that you have the private key. So I will simply go ahead and select the certificate and the private key, right click and select export to items. I will then go ahead and export my certificates, export them to a specific location that you're aware of, and I will call this LPA Finance Cert for certificate. Hit on save, and I'm going to require a password. So I will just write a password in here, verify it, click on OK, and that certificate is going to be created. So I can just close this, and back in App Center, I'm going to explore where my certificate is. So I will find my certificate. Notice that this is actually a P12 file. Hit on open, and I will have to write the password for my certificate. And because this is now being signed, actually I need to set this build for device. I was setting this to simulator. I can now distribute my build to my collaborators, which in this case is just me. But we are now going to be signing the builds. So I can actually, same like on Android, save and build immediately. And this is going to be building my application again, because this had been built before. Now, while this builds, let me go ahead and do the same thing for the testers. So I will go ahead and configure these to be device build. I'm going to need a provisioning profile, which should be on my downloads folder. I see my .mobile provision file. I will go ahead and upload the certificate as well. It's going to be the same certificate. Go ahead and write the password, distribute this build. This is going to be distributed to Alpha Testers iOS. I have no testers there, but I will be distributing to that group, and click save and build as well. And let's go ahead and build this branch. Once this has been built, I will actually be able to install from one device. And of course, it's going to work very similarly to what we saw with Android, but actually for iOS, since we're going to be requiring to install a profile, you'll see what I mean in just a second, we will need to do this from Safari. So let me go ahead and show you my phone screen right here. And again, I'm on Safari in here. So what I will have to do is navigate to the same page, install.appcenter.ms. This is the same page that we navigated to from the Android phone. And the first thing that I will have to do, of course, is log in. So let me go ahead and log in right here. And as soon as I log in, I will actually see already the applications, but this is actually because I have already done a step for one of the other applications. You will probably, let me actually navigate over to my profile in here. You will probably see something more similar like this the first time. Notice that this is an iPhone 5S. This is the first one listed in here. This device has already been added for testing. If you haven't added your device, because it wasn't listed when we created the profile, you will have to add a new device. And this is going to actually request to install a profile. So you will have to go over and install a profile in here. And this is actually in Spanish, this phone, but this is just telling me that we are going to be installing a profile. Hit on install, going to enter my code, and this is going to go ahead and install the profile. Now this phone already had that profile, which is why I didn't see this prompt at the beginning. But let me actually pause this for a second and show you that over here on the App Center in the distribute section, you could go either to the alpha testers or in this case to collaborators and see a tab that you wouldn't see on Android, the devices tab. And in here, we already see the iPhone 5S and the iPhone 10 that I showed you. But your alpha testers, if you didn't have their devices or you didn't select them when creating the profile, would actually start to appear here on provisioned. And you will have to go ahead and provision them for them to go ahead and actually install the application. If you don't provision them, they wouldn't see the install button. So just a quick note in here. Now let me go ahead and navigate back to my phone. Again, because this is already with the profile in there and this is already provisioned, I can select the application and see the install button. This install button wouldn't appear until you actually sign the devices, until you provision the devices there in the distribute tab where I just showed you. But let me actually go ahead and install this on the device. It's going to go ahead and download the application. It's going to request confirmation that I actually want to install. And I can just head back and get out of Safari and we will see the application there beginning to be installed. After a few seconds, we see the application here and we can actually launch the application now. And we can see here the application working. But that is not important. We have seen the application before. The thing that is important in here is for again to notice that for the testers, if you hadn't provisioned their devices, you will actually have to go to distribute, select the group, select devices, and you will see more devices as your users start to register their devices and install the profile that we just saw. And you will have to provision them before they see the download button. So this is how you sign the builds for distribution not to the store yet here on iOS. For the store, what we're going to do with master is again going to configure this for release, for device build. We're going to sign the builds and we're going to be distributing to the store. So we will need to connect, in this case, not to the Play Store, of course, but to the App Store through iTunes Connect, for which we're going to need to do a few more things. So it's going to be something that we cover later on in this section. For now, we have already learned how to distribute to our testers and to ourselves or any other collaborator. In the next few lectures, we're actually going to do something different than distributing. We're actually going to learn how we can start to diagnose crashes or errors inside of our application, and how we can actually implement some analytics for us to know how our applications are being used.